As electric vehicles proliferate in the economy, a question arises as to how they will be serviced. Or, put another way, what's going to happen to automotive dealerships when electric vehicles don't require as much repair? Maybe they get sold online, like Volvo, for instance, said it's not going to have sell through dealerships. It'll sell its electric vehicles online. So to answer some of those questions, I'm going to talk to Sam Abuelsamid, who's an automotive engineer and EV analyst for Guidehouse Insights. So welcome to the interview, Sam.
It's good to be back with you again, Markham.
Well, good to have you here. I always enjoy our chats, and particularly in this space, man, have things changed. I've been interviewing you for what, at least 3 years, I think.
Something like
And
that, yeah.
yeah, and from the time that we're having our first conversations, which would have been pre-COVID probably, and to now, it's just the landscape is transformed. And with more EVs and the OEMs getting into EV manufacturing in a big way, what are we going to do with dealerships? What are they going to do with dealerships?
Yeah, this has been a question for automakers, for traditional automakers for a long time, about how to handle dealerships, particularly for the North American domestic brands, because they have so many dealerships. As we make the transition to EVs, we're already starting to see some changes because newcomers into the marketplace, starting with Tesla, but other brands like Rivian, Lucid, Fisker, and others that are focusing just on EVs, have gone a different route from traditional automakers, with foregoing franchise dealers and selling direct to consumers. That has both positives and negatives for the companies. Positives in that they collect all of the revenue from the sale of that vehicle rather than just a wholesale price. But the negative is that they also have to have some physical real estate, make investments in a service infrastructure that they otherwise wouldn't have to do with dealers, because the dealers they spend that money and make that investment. So it's a challenge. And at least here in the US, state by state, we've got different franchise laws that restrict the ability of manufacturers that have franchise dealers to compete with them by selling direct to consumers. So in most states, if a company has dealers in place already, they cannot sell direct to consumers. But what they've been doing over the last couple of years of the pandemic is they've kind of tried to evolve a hybrid model where they're working with their dealers as partners and developing online sales channels, so that customers can go in and order a vehicle online, configure it, and do the same kinds of things they would do if they're ordering a Tesla or a Rivian. And then at the end of the process, they select the dealer that they want to take delivery from, and the dealer then provides the customer support. And that's going to continue to evolve over time as we move forward.
That's really interesting. And one of the issues is that, of course, that EVs will, at least we think, will require a lot less repair. There's 24 moving parts in an EV versus a couple thousand in an internal combustion engine car.
Depends on how you count parts, but
we're in the ballpark, right? We're in the ballpark.
I mean, if you count the rotor of an electric motor as a single part, then yeah, that's one part that's moving in an electric motor. But the reality is that rotor is made up of usually hundreds of laminate plates and several dozen magnets and some bearings and other stuff. So it's not quite as simple as people like to make it out to be.
I learned my lesson years ago not to have these conversations with engineers, and apparently I needed to learn it all over again. So thank you for that. Well, anyway,
it's our job to be pedantic.
That's right. So the bottom line is EVs are not supposed to require as much maintenance and repair as internal combustion engine vehicles. Mm-hmm. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I had a mobile mechanic come to my house, change the brakes on my 2013 Toyota Matrix, and we got chatting as car guys are wont to do. And we talked about electric vehicles, and he said, well, I'm already taking a certification for EVs. And when I talk to these guys, they're talking about how maybe what they'll do, and I don't think they're talking about like OEMs, but maybe like the Teslas or somebody else that doesn't have a dealership already. And they're trying to build a network of independents that are trained in EVs, and they can get them parts in a hurry if something, breaks and needs to be replaced. Does that have any relevance to, what you're hearing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, as we move forward, first of all, on the topic of EVs and service, while EVs don't need things like oil changes, they do still need occasional service on other things like brake systems, suspension components, and various other things. And the reality is, modern vehicles, whether they're powered by gas or electrons, are they're they've required a lot less service anyway. Anything built in the last 25, 30 years never requires a tune-up. Chances are, you're going to go 100,000 miles or more before you need to change a spark plug. So aside from oil and filter changes, there's not actually a whole lot else you need to do as far as regular service on modern vehicles. The other stuff, the wear items like brake pads, tire rotations, wiper blades, that stuff still needs to be done. Doesn't matter what the propulsion system is. One of the things that is evolving, as part of this, I mentioned, this kind of hybrid model that traditional automakers are developing, is they want to shift at least some of their dealer body towards being EV specialists and move away from the traditional model of a dealer might have hundreds, or in some cases even upwards of 1,000 vehicles in their inventory, and having consumers come in and buy vehicles from inventory instead of factory ordering them, and shift those towards a smaller physical footprint. So you have, maybe you have a couple of dozen vehicles in inventory so that you have something for people to test drive, take a look, sit in it, feel it, does this work for me? And also for people that, might actually need to buy a vehicle today, if their car gets into a crash or gets stolen or whatever, then, and they need something right away, the dealers will have some number of vehicles, but the rest, they'll order, and automakers are working to expedite those orders. And then for the service, again, reducing that physical footprint requirement for or service at a dealership. Most automakers are experimenting with this idea of mobile service, for some of the smaller repairs that don't need, if you don't need to put the vehicle up on a hoist, do it in somebody's, come to the customer's home and do it in their driveway. So I think we will see a lot more of that going forward.
Well, let's talk about services. Now, this is something you and I discussed in a previous interview when we were talking about Ford on the commercial side. And Ford is going to offer various connected services. So let's say a fleet manager who has a dozen or 100 vehicles out at any particular time gets a bunch of data that they can crunch, and so they can compare performance and so on. And I'm wondering if there's any way for dealerships to play in that space and therefore make up some of the revenue they might lose otherwise.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an opportunity there, and I think we will see the manufacturers pulling the dealerships into this, so that they can, one of the things that manufacturers want to do is proactive service or predictive diagnostics. If you've got a connected vehicle, there are certain things that you can monitor in the vehicle in real time, and there will be certain indicators. When certain signals change, it'll be an indication that, hey, maybe this is going to need service. This might indicate a problem with your battery, whether it's your 12-volt battery or your big high voltage battery, or a problem with an electronic component. And when the system detects that, hey, this is probably going to need service, then the manufacturer can send you an alert to your vehicle and say, hey, you're going to need to service this battery, in the near future. Would you like to schedule an appointment? And then they can tie in directly to the dealer and say, hey, okay, you want to schedule an appointment? You do this right in your car as you're driving down the road. Here's your nearest dealer. Does this time work for you? And you can have that all done right away without having to go and call the dealer separately and schedule it all. You can do it all right from your vehicle. So that's one of the ways that dealers are going to get tied into these connected services.
It amuses me to no end that we're talking about it all being done without having to call your dealer, as if that's some sort of horrible, inconvenience. And a lot of times it is. That's
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to call someplace, call a service, ask for the service department, then be on hold for 15 minutes, while waiting for somebody to pick up the phone. If you can do it right from the touch screen in your car, great. And then a lot of the things that will need to be fixed in the future, software updates, the dealers won't even have to deal with those. Those will just be handled over the air, just like your phone.
Man, I can't tell you. I can't wait to get an electric vehicle so that I don't have to deal with dealers as much, and updates get done, fixes get done over the internet. I love that. Okay, Sam, thank you very much for this. Always appreciate our chats.
My pleasure. Have a great day.